Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of our online design festival and the second session of today. We have Simren with us, which is absolutely incredible, and it's our first look at people's career stories. So we're going to be doing 3 of these this week. So we're starting with it today, and then we've got Sandra Adu tomorrow, and then we've got Radim, who I've just noticed on the call, is on Friday. What we want to do is really go through how people have really worked their way into design, through whether that's through childhood, starting to be creative, going into education, early roles, even maybe having to subsidise that through other things, and the challenges that they face. But to start with, I'll ask someone just to take us back and lead us through that, and then we can look at Q&A afterwards. If anybody's got any questions on what is said, please drop them into the chat, and I can ask those on your behalf. But until then, Simren, if that's okay to throw it over to you and just hear about your journey.
Totally. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I know it's intimidating, but if you can turn on your cameras, that would be amazing. It'd be nice to see some faces, not just me and Chris. So yes, thank you, Radim. Hi. Hiya. Yeah, I think I'll go back to the beginnings. Chris and I were chatting earlier about going back to childhood. And as cliche as it sounds, like everybody says this, but I was a creative child. And I think a lot of the time I would choose solo time to paint versus playing with other children or playing by myself. I would always choose painting or being creative over that. So I knew it was something I really enjoyed. And I think a lot of the time when you enjoy something, you become good at it. And so creativity was always a part of me. And I think it almost became part of my DNA and my personality. Like if you had a friend or family describe me as a kid, they would probably say creative, always painting, always had, like, I have so many childhood pictures of just paint all over me and just paint all over my face. So that was before I knew like the wider world of design, and my focus was on, I want to be an artist. Like I want to paint because that's all I really knew. But we'll kind of jump back to that later in the conversation. So for me, I think you're always taught whatever you're good at, you will succeed in your career. So for me, I felt like I was really good at art and painting, but always, like, I'm South Asian. So growing up in a South Asian background, my parents are immigrants. So when they've come to the UK, they wanted for me what they couldn't have. So I was the first person, like my parents didn't go to university. So it was really important I go to university for them. And also my career options really were dentist, doctor, or lawyer. Anything else is just a failure, really. I'm sure some of you can probably relate to that as well, because you Gayatri on the call. So my parents were supportive, but it's just like all they knew was those 3 roles can make you successful and you can make a lot of money out of it. So those were the only options, really. And then I guess it was always a battle for like school and then GCSEs. I'd always get involved in like school competitions or external competitions where I could, to almost prove myself, I guess, to my parents, like this is a good thing to do. And then it got to choosing A levels. And again, you've got to whittle down. So it's crazy how early you have to choose your career and how quickly you have to whittle it down to 3 options, max 4. And because I still hadn't won the battle of creativity being the only way forward for me, and also weirdly, I really enjoyed biology. Not sure why, but that was something I absolutely loved. So I chose biology, art, and chemistry. And I say chose, I was more or less forced into those options. I won with the art, but if I had it my way, I would have probably chosen art, drama, and design technology. So all creative subjects. The reason being for the biochem art, it just meant that if I still didn't love art, or my parents were kind of thinking, your options are open, like after you finished your A levels, then maybe revisit the question and you could do biology as a degree or art as a degree, etc., etc. I managed to buy myself a year with the foundation course, which a lot of people do, and it's absolutely amazing. although I've just found out recently that you now have to pay for it, and it was free for me at the time. So it was an easy win with my parents. Like, let me just see where this goes. It's 1 year, it's free. Let me figure that out. And then afterwards, if it's still not the one, then I will do a biology degree. So did my foundation year, absolutely loved it. Like, probably was the best time of my life. I wish I could do it again. And if any of you are thinking about it, I would highly recommend to do that foundation year. And then it was within the foundation that I realized it's not just painting. Like, it's not just using paintbrushes, etc., which equals creativity. Because I think in there you go through all these different pathways. So I did some fashion design, I did some photography, and that is where I then found graphic design as a module, which I carried on. And for me, it was like, wow, okay, I can be creative, I can also illustrate, and I discovered typography, and I really enjoyed that. But it was more of I think the theme of it all was, how can I make money and how can I be self-sufficient? Because ultimately that's what we need. Like, as much as it is a joy, we do need to be able to make money from it. And from what I saw and from what I'd learned and from talking to other people, if you are going to do the fine art route, or sometimes even illustration route, it's the people you know and the connections that you have. And that class is normally a lot higher than where I sat. So I did have those connections, and I knew I wouldn't have those opportunities just handed to me. I'm not saying that all fine artists are just handed opportunities. That's not what I'm saying. You either do that or you work really hard, and it's no guarantee that you will be a successful fine artist or illustrator. So for me, it was, okay, graphic design, I can actually just get a job being paid to be creative, still enjoy it. So yeah, that's where I discovered graphic design. And then it was convincing my parents that this was a sane thing to do. But I think the graphic design part helped. So, like, showing them job roles, like, this is an actual job, I can do this, etc. And then it came to applying for universities. And I think, again, maybe another theme is proving myself. So I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to the best university that I know. And at that time, I was always taught that UAL were the best. Don't know if that's still true. Don't know if it was ever true. But I certainly enjoyed my time there. And another reason for choosing that actually was I had a second cousin who was a graphic designer, and I had a conversation with her at somebody's wedding, which my dad had set up. So my dad had spoken to her and said, like, I think he was really trying to figure out if it actually was a viable career, or how much she was enjoying it and how much money she was making before I chose that at university. And I was straddling the line again between graphic design and biology to study for a BA. And there's something she said. She was like, we need more women in graphic design. There's not enough women. And I was like, sold. Like, I want to be part of that for some reason. Now understanding, like, it's a wider picture. It's not just women, it's women of color, etc., which is something that I am working towards, but we can touch on that a bit later. So yeah, I think really enjoyed my time at UAL. I went to London College of Communication. I had some amazing tutors who really believe in the students. And then I think throughout that, whilst I had chosen something and my parents now understood it was a viable option, they became super supportive in everything. Like, even like helping me make the model structures in university, and really got hands-on. So yeah, that was amazing. And then I think another thing that really helped me was, instead of waiting until I finished university to then do internships, to then get a full-time job, I began to do internships in my summer breaks, or the breaks that we had at university, to give me a head start, I guess, because I thought then, again, making money being the theme, I could get stuck into, instead of getting like a job at Topshop at university, it meant that I was having something on my CV, still getting paid for those internships. And then when I came out of university, I could go hopefully straight into a job. So then, yes, finishing uni, I'd done some internships, which I was very lucky in getting that opportunity, because it was that one cousin that gave me that first opportunity for that internship that then snowballed into other opportunities. So I think, again, that's another thing that's really important. It's just getting that first chance, or giving someone that first chance. And then, yes, so I finished university, graduated, and then landed my first full-time role. I had done some freelance, which is where I stayed for 5 years. So I absolutely loved it. It was Colorado Studios, based in Soho. It was a super small boutique-sized agency, but that meant that I was able to like really grow. I was the first person they hired. So that was an amazing experience to be, I guess, chosen as the first person, but then see it grow and evolve and new projects and other people come in. That was amazing. And yeah, I think that then leads me then to applying to Design Bridge. I've been there for 2 years now. So, and I'm really enjoying it. And I think, oh, I can see Gayatri clapping. That's where I met Gayatri. And I think that's the journey. There are other things that I would love to chop on, but maybe open the floor to you, Chris, to ask.
Yeah, cool. I've written about 8,000 questions already. I've not fell asleep. I'm just writing, head down and writing. I think people tend to think I'm looking at my phone or something because they used to see my head down. It's really funny what you've said so far, because it really correlates with on Monday, our first session was a guest session led by Black Girls in Design. So it's a community to do just that.
Yeah.
To celebrate and raise awareness, and more importantly, challenge and sort of change attitudes. Sandra, who started it, led it with 2 of her team. Incredible, strong, made me feel incredibly embarrassed about the state of play. My original reason for wanting those guys to be involved was to sort of look at how people like myself and the wider design industry needs to change and stop being so self-centered, and we need to sort of look at other people's. But what really came about with that was one of the biggest challenges that I'd never thought of, because I've never been in it, obviously, was the family challenge, because that's such an you're so close to family. It's one of the first influences that you get, and that was the same. It was trying to educate their parents about this is a viable career. This is what I feel naturally leaning towards. I'd like to do it, but the pressure was to sort of head into other areas. Do you think that education needs to be wider reaching to sort of show that creative careers don't have to just be the traditional or stereotypical look at maybe art, where you sort of you sit in a studio and you're creative, you sort of sit in this dark room and you paint and you never make money until you pass on and someone else makes money for you. Do you think we need to look at a wider education plan to sort of help parents and people from other cultures and heritages to sort of realise that there is a gateway in for people?
Yeah, I think it is really important to educate. So a personal project I'm doing is called How Many South Asian Designers Do You Know? And it's all about that. And it's an interview with South Asian, at the moment it's just female based, so with South Asian women. And in that, it will be a publication that the students in school, when they're choosing options, can take home to their parents. It will have kind of like a biography of said person with the salary that they earn, if like most people have been comfortable to share that because they understand the importance of that. And like I said, I had that one person who was really, really open to sharing everything from her salary, how that's kind of accelerated throughout her career, so I could understand if it's something that I wanted to do. And I think that is really important. But I think another factor to that is now we're in the age of social media and Instagram and et cetera, et cetera. It's easy to see so many different professions. Whereas at the time when I was choosing, I had no visibility of graphic design because there was no way to see that. So I think that it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's a shame a little bit saying about Sandra and the Black Girls in Design. it's a shame that that has to exist. You know,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a sorry state of affairs. But whether there's a lot, what you're doing, what you just mentioned there, is that proactive nature is amazing. But whether there's something more industry wide that could be done to sort of target people in different ways and sort of, you know, to sort of lift the lid a bit on what goes, because it does seem a bit insular at times. I find, you know,
Yeah.
it's a bit hidden. It's a bit, people don't want to talk about things. You know, salaries aren't on job listings still, and a lot of times, and that's so frustrating for some
Yeah.
people. You know, all these sorts of things that would really break that you know, that stereotype. Would really help, wouldn't it, people to gauge, not just for parents, but for the people themselves and the
Yeah.
children that also can see it as a viable future, and there's so many options. It's also thinking that when it comes to interns as well, that needing to have much more structure around that, and much more policing maybe about being paid, being more subsidised, you know, being available for a lot of people. Again, with
Yeah.
you finding that must have been so helpful.
Yeah, I think it's very important, like, for nobody to take up the unpaid internships. Just like, don't fill that space. And it's easy to say, but having an unpaid internship means you're an extremely privileged person to be able to afford that or to do that. And I think you need to kind of look around and realize, to level the playing field, they have to all be paid. And also not just people from university. Like, sometimes I think, going back, now the industry is taking people who haven't been to university a lot more, and there's programs like the D&AD shift program that really helps people to do that. And also DesignBridge has a program called The Start, which is also helpful. So there are new programs coming up. So as the university fees are so expensive now, again, it's like quite privileged to go to university. So taking those people from backgrounds which aren't familiar to yourself or to the hiring manager, and having that in the industry, is so important.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're either privileged, or you have to sacrifice a hell of a lot, put yourself in a very, very bad position for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That gets overlooked. The mental effect of that for years to come. You know, that can, it can be, you know, decades. People still have to pay that sort of stuff back, don't they? Or just having that round their neck. I know
Yeah.
there's certain criteria out there. You don't pay it until you reach a certain level, but still knowing it's there in a, you know, in the world that we live in currently, when, you know, trying to buy a house, for instance, is virtually impossible, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
all those sorts of things. It's not a good place to be. I think that also one of the things is, a lot of the programs that currently exist, they are quite big city centric, aren't they? So I'm
Yeah.
always concerned personally about people that are maybe on the outside of those areas, live in smaller pockets, villages, towns, cities that aren't connected as easily. And how do they, you know, how do they get themselves into this world with all of those other challenges? It's very difficult, isn't it? But I suppose that's why a lot of these things exist, to sort of try and create an alternative that will give people the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Sure.
From the family member perspective, I'm really interested in that. If ironically feeling quite privileged to have somebody here. It's funny, isn't it, how we talk about these sort of things, that, you know, the idea of sort of that's of a certain class system is very privileged, and
Yeah.
then you sort of feel ever slightly privileged because you had somebody within the family that
Yeah.
it's you know, it's so polar opposite, isn't it? But compared to somebody that doesn't have anybody in the family,
Yeah.
how do you think that that would have panned out if that didn't exist? Do you think you maybe would have been pushed towards the? I like the idea of being a art chemist. So that would be you'd create some interesting work with those
Oh my
qualifications.
God. Honestly, like, I even looked at degrees where it's like, you do illustrations for biology. So it's like, I can't remember the technical term, but I was like, can I marry up the two? Like, I literally looked at everything. It's a good question. I can only speculate because I don't know what I would have done in this scenario. I just remember having that conversation with that family member, and making that split decision then and there at the wedding, like, I'm going to do this. Had I not had that conversation, I'm not sure I would have had the guts to push my parents for allowing me to choose a creative subject.
Yeah, it must be really, you'd know way far better than I would, but to think of the talent that's lost, or the
Yeah.
people that, you know, could start to drive change um, through just a lack of education from the system itself, or from people like myself, or, you know, the backgrounds that I come from, we should be doing so much more. And I'd like to move on to sort of current challenges. I'm always conscious of the time of these things. People, anyone that's listened to a few of these will hear us say that all the time. Moving on to that sort of, well, not necessarily challenges. I don't want this all to be about the, adversity and the things that you face, but because it's about your story and getting to a place, and obviously you're still in the infancy of your career, but that's where Design Bridge, which is heavily respected in the design world and well known. Are there still challenges that you face, not necessarily within employment, but things that you face, or you think people that you know within, certain, from a female perspective, from someone of colour, from other heritage and cultures that you still think need to be changed or should be addressed at least?
Yes, there's a lot. I think one way that Design Bridge is a great place, there's a lot of female leadership, but that female leadership is all white. So I think one thing is having that female, and I know I'm very lucky to, again, I'd probably say privileged, to be in a studio where there is such phenomenal female leadership. But I would really love to see a South Asian leadership position, women in leadership. And I can't see that. Hopefully I will be that for somebody later down the years to come. But it's really visible to me that there isn't that relatability. I do feel that. And again, I'm also the only South Asian designer in the studio. So I also feel that. And it was only when a friend of mine had done a talk about diversity in design, and she's Southeast Asian instead of South Asian. And there are a lot of Southeast Asian leadership women in Design Bridge. And she was saying how she feels very privileged to have that and have that connection and to be able to speak to those women. And that's when I was like, I don't have that. And I would love that. Yeah.
Would that be something that you think that you could be the leader of then? You think you could be the change?
Yeah, let's do it.
Why not? I think it's different, isn't it, to being happy to sort of find a space and be from a certain place, but then to want to be the one that the catalyst that creates the change. That's a completely different mental state, isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. Which is why I am doing what I am doing, but it's more, and I think another thing to touch upon that, I think to be able to get more diversity into those leadership positions, more resource needs to be driven to those people to pull them up faster, to get them there, to give them the visibility, because it's when you see that person that, like, I'm talking about the students or etc., that's when you want to join a company, or that's when you choose to be in design, because you can relate to somebody.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah,
whether that's just being from a sex perspective or from a part of the world perspective, it's ever so important to not the class thing as well. I think our industry is still sort of quite shackled by that, that perception. I feel like I'm reading a book at the moment by John Barnes, but it's about the honest truth about racism, and it's a very difficult thing to read, but that's the whole point. It challenges you, but it is all about perception and all about what people immediately associate with certain types of people, which is really, really. I don't advise anybody to read it, but it's quite a hard thing to digest. This sort of thing, how ignorant white people have been in the past, and many others in other areas. And this is quite a big question. I don't really want to put you on the spot too much, but
oh god,
I'm trying to understand why a lot of this sort of stuff happens, and and whose responsibility is it to sort of try and drive the change? Because you could say within where you work, and that could be replicated thousands of studios worldwide.
Yeah.
I always feel like there should be a bit more of a governance around design to sort of try and drive much more policy that allows us to create, systematic change that we all adhere to. Obviously, you can have different processes and you can work with different people. Those sort of things are all skin deep and don't really matter. But the idea that it'd like be nice to see more South Asian leadership in Design Bridge. But is that up to them to make that happen, or should that be a policy that brings through a whole swathe of people, so that there's just a mix, a community that really is diverse, not just something that we throw around as a word, as something to look good, lip service, like when it's Pride and we all change our social media logo to rainbows. It doesn't mean anything, does it? Unless we actually try and make proper change, none of that sort of works. None of that means a great deal. There has to be much more, surely, as a as an industry, there has to be much more of a desire to change, for us all to do everything we can, not just one or two people.
No, totally agree. I think there's loads of questions in there, Chris. So I'm gonna need one at a time. I do think that it needs to be a wider industry thing. I don't think it should just be left to the ethnic minority groups to pull in those people. And I do see some studios or some agencies doing work to bring people in from different backgrounds. And I think, again, talking to the university part, if you don't have people from university and you try and bring in people who haven't been able to study, a lot of those groups are normally more ethnic diverse groups a lot of the time. But I think it's kind of hand in hand, because you bring people in by seeing those leadership roles. That's one way, like having relatable people within the leadership roles makes you want to join a company or makes you want to be a designer, for example. But then having the resources for the less economically privileged people, which may not even just be diverse people, just as a whole, they would need resources, they would need infrastructure put in place to allow them to either go to university or to do a program like D&AD Shift, for example. But those programs, so D&AD Shift is absolutely amazing, and I've been really involved with that. However, it is isolated and it is a small pool of people, because it's you don't pay to be there. So I think maybe those groups either need to be bigger or more of them. That'll be really helpful. But then there's like the flip side. Like I heard somebody on the train, and it really pissed me off. About, am I allowed to swear? No, it was really bad. I wanted to say something, but also I was just like, this conversation is going to go nowhere. She was speaking to somebody on the phone about roles in the theatre. I think it was like her daughter was applying to be an actor in the theatre in London, and she didn't get the role, but someone who is ethnically diverse did get the role. And she was talking to her friend about it and speaking about how they're just given the opportunities. They won't even look at white people anymore. Like they just need to tick a box. So even if a white person's more talented, they're going to take the other person anyway. And I was just like, oh God, like you don't even get it. Like where do we even begin with this conversation? But there are obviously people out there that feel that way, that feel that other people are being prioritized now because diversity is such a hot topic. So there's that flip side as well.
I think that's my biggest fear, is that mentality is actually the majority, but it's predominantly underground. It's not necessarily spoken. You might have heard that in passing. I don't think she would have ever said that probably in public without a phone. Probably just completely blasé that she was even speaking out loud and anybody could hear.
Yeah.
I really do feel that is a problem. But that goes back to this concept. There's so much, and I see it from somebody of privilege, but somebody that's never worked in London, never worked in a huge agency, never worked with super global clients, and has always sort of worked in a quite a small part of the UK. Happy to do my little thing in my little corner, but there always feels like for everybody, or the majority of people, there's a gatekeeping attitude and there's a barrier to entry, and that those two is just so difficult to overcome for the majority of people. Then you add on race or sex or privilege or finance or whatever it might be. Those things just get steeper and steeper and more impossible to overcome, to the point where you just sort of turn your back on it a lot of the time. You lose the love for it because you feel, having a desire to want to be in this industry, to be prevented from the people that are within it, let alone maybe the challenges of family like you've experienced, is just sometimes insurmountable. So how do you find the energy to sort of keep on going with
that? For me, it's always looking back at who did I need when I was growing up and trying to be that person for other people. Something that just popped in my mind as well with what you were saying about the barrier. I think there is, how do I word this? Being politically correct. when you have, for example, a white male hiring manager, you relate to other white males a lot easier than you would a black woman, for example. And you lean into that person more. It's natural. Like, you can relate to people more, you connect easier, just the way I might then connect if I was hiring with someone South Asian. But because you have those people in leadership that are all white, there may be bias, but not purposeful. I don't think it's ever a conscious thing, but I think you need to have other people in the room to prevent those biases from happening.
Yeah, the unconscious bias is really bad. I think it's sort of pretty. At times, it's if you surround yourself with clones of yourself, it's going to be impossible to break. That's how it is. So you need to intentionally bring people up. But what I don't understand is why people don't see that as a real positive. Is that those like cultural influences and what that brings, especially to the creative process.
Yeah,
that's incredible, because when I do editions of Right Line where we're talking about studios telling us how they make things, it's all about curiosity and exploring different parts of the world and different cultures in food or music or film, etc., etc. But if that's just being driven by people that have only got a one-dimensional perspective of it, it doesn't really create that thing at the end that could be something so much more. But I don't really know how you sort of break those things. I think you just have to be. I think maybe people have to just be really proactive in making that happen. I think to start with, somebody has to be the trigger in that and start to break that down, whether that's within a business or within a wider sector or niche within the whole industry. I think you need to be actually proactive with that. But that's why I always think that something like some sort of governing body would be really good for that, to bring people together, whether that's a not-for-profit, because it sort of sets a standard, isn't it? Where we don't want to be governed in terms of told what to do, but we want to be sort of maybe led. And you've got to be led by the strongest around you. And I always think that's what's wrong with governments, is that you tend to be led by the weakest amongst us, don't we? And that's discourse happens, and everybody gets rather frustrated with the system.
but what you're saying is quite important, because I think companies do have a diversity tick box to adhere to, but I'm not sure whether there has to be a certain percentage or whether companies just try and get that number higher. But I think it's really important that we're not just ticking a box to say, yes, we have diverse people. You get those people in and you need them to want to stay and want to stay within your company, because you are putting resource into them to helping them grow and to push them up in positions and to leadership positions, versus just hiring them and not investing much in them.
Yeah, and those charters, or whatever people like to call it, to sound grandiose, much more than what it is. If they are set out just to, like you say, just to tick a box, just to file a form, or just to make somebody, and it tends to be organisations that have got of a certain size because they might have stakeholders or investors, etc. It's a little bit, it's a different context, but it's a bit the same as sort of saying sustainability. If you just tick the box and say, yes, we threaded an email, as opposed to actually, committing to sort of providing evidence or doing that for real, there's no point in just sort of saying, yes, we're interested in diversity, hiring, one person of colour, and then just sort of saying, well, we can leave that now until somebody questions it again. It should be part of the values of what the business is built upon, as opposed to, oh God, this is something we've got to do again, and it's so boring, repetitive. But I think that's enough of maybe some of the darker side. I'd like to sort of, the last sort of few minutes end on the positives, really. The things that are going on in your world and the industry as a whole that you think are really moving forward quickly and for the best.
Yeah, I think a positive is that it is becoming a hot topic, and people say diversity in design is becoming a bit of a trend. But I think that's really important, that's a great thing that people are having these conversations and driving awareness and pushing further. However, it can't just end at those conversations or at those panel discussions. That needs to be driven through, given a priority, really. Again, like your example about, I would say, like the sustainability example that you gave, if a client came to me saying they want to create some sustainable packaging and they want to be known as more sustainable, etc., the question I would ask back is, how else are you being sustainable? Like, is your production sustainable? is your printing sustainable? Like every touch point or every decision you make then should be a sustainable decision. Otherwise, you're just greenwashing. And I think it's the same with diversity. It's like you can't just hire diverse people or say you want to drive diversity or be an ally. You need to be doing that at every touch point, whether it's your hiring, whether you're doing portfolio reviews for other people, whether you're doing lectures or going to schools. Like, just ensure that you're doing everything you can at everything that you touch to ensure that that diversity is a thread that is throughout something versus just a tick box.
Yeah, and I presume that that's for that not to just end at a few conversations like this and articles in blogs and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
we just have to, from your perspective, we just need to keep it at the forefront of people's minds.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's something that I'll definitely love to keep on talking to you and many others about. And funny if it's not funny at all. It's just it comes up so often, and the same sort of stories. I'm not sure if you know Fahood. We spoke to him.
Yeah.
About 18 months ago now, and it's very similar, trajectory in terms of felt very extremely lucky to get the opportunities in internships and others, but had to prove so much just to get that opportunity, and someone like myself has just fallen into it and don't realise how lucky you are. It's quite sad, really. I suppose time only really tells you those sort of things, makes you sort of sit up and life experiences make you think you need to do something about it. So it's definitely something we need to look at more and more. From a Bright Lines perspective, but just as an individual, need to do so much more now. Because no other questions have dropped in, I just wanted to ask you where people can find you if they wanted to connect and maybe continue that, because I know quite a lot of people like speaking privately, understandably, with people that we've had on, as participants. So if you've got anywhere for people to find you online and maybe carry that conversation on.
Yes, for sure. So I'm quite active on Instagram. So it's literally at Simren Degun, just at my first name and my last name, which you should be seeing underneath my video anyway, or on LinkedIn. And then my email is simren.degun. I can drop that in the chat, actually. It will be a bit easier.
And you must be happy that this is over, because then I won't tag you in 5,000 posts a day about for weeks on end about what's coming up.
And then that is my Instagram. Something I did want to say, actually, which I noticed was, like, when I was reflecting on what you'd said this conversation would be about, is being really bold, and something that I had done throughout my career. And again, I think it was more of a have to prove myself, like I have to succeed in this because I've chosen this and I've got to get my family to do this, so I have no other option, is to be really bold and be really proactive. Like, if you want to speak to somebody, do it, even if they seem so out of reach. So for me in university, and I still really look up to her, Marina Willer, Pentagram partner, she had done a talk which I attended, and at the end I just said, like, I'd love your email, it'd be great to meet up for a coffee and do a portfolio review with you, expecting like nothing of it. But she replied, and I got to go to Pentagram and meet Marina Willer and do a full portfolio review, have a tour of the studios. And I think it's important to persist, continuously email someone, because it easily gets lost. And yeah, just push, because everybody's really friendly, but they're busy.
I can agree more. I think that's one thing that's come out of the conversations that we have had. We've done, I think, over 200 since starting now. But it really does show there's just humans behind all this stuff. We're so focused a lot of the time on the case studies, on the work, on the glorious, shiny stuff to win clients and make money and keep afloat, etc., etc.
Yeah,
that's fine when we're talking to prospective clients and businesses. But as an industry looking in, that is ever so true and so evident in what we've done. People are so willing to give their time. They might not immediately respond, and they might not be able to do everything that you ask for, but there's definitely people willing to start conversations and run a thread over a long period of time just to support and help. And it does take when I was younger, I would never have done that. I never would have emailed them, too petrified to have done it, fear of what might get said. But we can only repeat that and tell people that there is a lot of support out there. So just sort of try and take the bull by the horns when the time is right and reach out. And now
Yeah.
you've got Simren's email. Just send her a turn. But yeah, no, I really appreciate your time, Simren. It's been so nice to. We've spoken a couple of times in the past, haven't we? And it's been nice to actually get a bit deeper onto your story and much more about the specifics. And it's so inspiring to hear. So hopefully, it's we can be part of that change and help you whenever possible.
Perfect, brilliant. Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for joining as well. I hope it helped in some way. And yes, as Chris said, if there is anything you want to ask me, any portfolio review that you would like to have, I will be more than happy to help.
Brilliant. Absolutely spectacular. Thank you very much, Simren. I will speak to you very soon. Take care and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, bye.
See you later.